I'm reading Sent to the River God Forgot by Jim and Janice Walton. Chapter 1. Does this jungle have a map? He is the way. Follow him through the land of unlikeliness, and you will see rare beasts and have unique adventures. W.H. Auden in Christmas Oratorio. Jim's story. You're moving where? But why? You'll be so far from home. You have plenty of ministry opportunities right where you are. Do you really want to raise your children in a jungle? When we told our friends and family that we were planning to go to Colombia, they thought we had lost our minds. And in the eyes of the world, we probably were crazy. We were abandoning our culture, leaving behind the relatively high standard of living we enjoyed in the United States, and moving far away from our loved ones. But the insistent word of God calling silenced all other voices. Yes, we would be living under primitive conditions. Yes?
You can use that pizza, eat that pizza from the other day.
It's Kimmy's.
Yeah. Dan, you want those last two pieces of pizza? Okay.
True, we would be far from our loved ones and would miss them terribly between visits. Undoubtedly, our children would encounter challenges that their counterparts in the States would not experience. But our faith was simple. When God called, we answered, and our answer was yes. As most people in our situation would do, we continually searched for signs of certainty before making such a drastic move. We had full assurance from the scriptures and from the way all the events of our decisions fell into place that we were in the center of God's plan. Still, we had doubts and fears of the unknown. Did God know where Colombia was? And did he have a map through the jungle? The decision was not made lightly or quickly. Once we had set our hearts and minds toward our new adventure, however, we were eager to begin. Unfortunately, one of the first lessons missionaries must learn is patience. And to me, it seemed like our journey to Colombia was taking forever. We left Minnesota's sub-zero temperatures on the day after Christmas, 1963. The long journey took us through Miami, Panama, and finally to Bogota. Throughout the trip, we somehow managed to carry the necessary carry-on baggage and still hold tightly to our 2-year-old Danny and 3-year-old Diana. We lost neither luggage nor children, which was nearly a miracle in itself. Soon after, we settled into the Summer Institute of Linguistics, SIL, guest house in Bogota. We began Spanish study at the University of the Andes. I grew up in Minnesota and Jan in Wisconsin, and neither of us had studied Spanish. We quickly came to love this beautiful language, the purity of the vowel sounds, the complexity of the verbs, and the vibrant thrill of the r rolled easily from the native speakers' tongues, and later from the tongues of our own children, who seemed unimpeded by past language habits. Jan and I struggled to learn as much Spanish as possible in the short 3-month course. In truth, I struggled more than Jan. Both of us, however, longed to get to our real task, to be out in the village somewhere learning one of the unwritten languages. First, we had to select a village, a group with whom we could live to observe their culture, study their language, and ultimately translate the scriptures. SIL's director, Clarence Church, assured us that the mission administration would work with us, guiding us in our choice. But the ultimate decision was ours. Approximately 78 languages are spoken in Colombia, with language groups ranging in size from 100 members to as many as 100,000. Our administrators directed our attention to one of the languages in southeastern Colombia in the state of Valpes, where some 12 to 15 language groups needed translations. This area, with its concentration of language groups, offered an ideal situation for a young mission with limited resources to reach the greatest number of people in the shortest time. If most missionary linguist teams were allocated close together, it would be easier to care for each other and provide logistical support, such as air transportation, radio communication, local government, and church relations. Non-Catholic educators, missionaries, and others had not been welcomed in many areas of the country for years. With a window of opportunity open in the Valpes, the administration wanted to allocate as many teams as possible, not knowing if or when the window might close again. We listened and we prayed, but we had no peace regarding any of the language groups in the Valpes. We wondered what God knew that we didn't know. We felt that we must find out God's plan for us. If not the Valpes, where and why? The answer to the first question was not long in coming. The second question was not answered for many years. The where was Colombia's southernmost state of Amazonas, which was also in the jungle and not open to foreigners. As members of SIL, we were allowed into these areas only because we had a contract with the Colombian government to study the phonetics and the morphology of Colombia's language and provide information and translation services to the government. The people that God led us to serve were the Muinanis. The village was La Sabana. La Sabana lay half a degree below the equator, deep in the jungle, and precisely in the area that Richard Collier wrote about in his book, The River That God Forgot. Though the Muinanis lived beyond the reach of most civilization, they had been touched cruelly by the horrors of the Casa Arana, the household of the Peruvian rubber baron Julio Arana, who exploited the jungles and their inhabitants in search of rubber. The Muinanis had suffered torture, slavery, death, and near genocide in the hands of white rubber hunters. They called the outsiders gun people or shooting people. All who came from the outside brought guns and death. Could we expect the Muinanis to welcome us, or even let us stay? How could we dare dream that we would be allowed to live in their land, learn their language, walk the trails, travel their rivers, and touch their children? We received no handwritten writing on the walls, felt no earthquake, saw no fire, just a sure small voice within us that led us to the Muinanis. Was this an impossible dream? Yes. But nevertheless, we felt a strange peace and confidence that God could somehow transform the dream into reality, and we went with the full blessing of our mission administrators. On July 3rd, 1964, Jan, Diana, and Dan waved goodbye as fellow linguists Stan Schauer and I left Loma Linda, SIL's new established mission center, 175 miles southeast of Bogota. Jan and the children would set up housekeeping in a one-room cabin at the center, while I went to find the Muinanis and our new home. At the border town of Puerto Leguizamo, we met up with JARS pilot Forey Zanders. JARS, JAARS, Jungle Aviation and Radio Service, is a technical service and supports division of SIL. So Forey and his Aeronca seaplane would fly us into the Amazon jungle, but we would still have a 2-day walk into La Sabana. Early the next morning, Stan and Forey and I made our way to the river. The little Aeronca, bobbing up and down on its floats, waited to carry us into the Amazon. After loading our supplies, the engine revved and we were off. Or should have been. The floats rode deep in the water. We roared down the river. We roared up the river. We turned around again and again, trying to take off. If I remember correctly, Forey only grunted when I jokingly suggested we taxi the whole way to La Sabana. The floats must have taken on water, Forey informed us. Now that we've burned off some fuel and some weight, there's no other reason for the problem. We taxied to the river's edge, climbed out into the pontoons, removed the covers, and dipped a sponge into the pontoon. We squeezed the water from the sponge back into the river until our hands were like ice and the floats were dry inside, and still we weren't able to take off. We had to eliminate some cargo. Over the next few years, it seems that every time we flew in or out of La Sabana, we argued with ourselves over what could be left behind. And even today, after a 20-year-long object lesson, I find myself tempted to add too much baggage to my life. Once in the air, my mind settled back to thinking about what might be ahead of us. The plane's single engine droned slowly on above the Putumayo River as we headed for the little town of El Encanto. We would land there on the wide, placid river to refuel. Don't waste time in El Encanto. Stan and I had been warned the blood-sucking gnats are the plague and will eat you alive. The warning was accurate. No, I'm just live streaming.
Okay. I'm just wondering where you are. Because your sandwich is ready.
Okay.